Alright, this is lesson 6 of U.S. history this year. And we left off in lesson 5. We were looking at the empires of the Greeks and Romans and how they inspired the Americans with their ideas of written law, democracy, and the representative democracy. Unfortunately, for Europe, the Roman Empire collapsed and Europe fell into chaos. The Roman Empire got too big, the leadership got too corrupt, it got too decentralized, and as a result, they were susceptible to attack by different tribes from the north and from Asia, including the Mongols and Huns. And when this happened, Europe fell into a chaos and a time in history where Europe as a continent went backwards. It was called the Middle Ages, also known as the Dark Ages. At this time, Europe was very, very violent. It was very dangerous. People were on a survival level. They were trying to survive. And because of that, there was little or no progress in Europe. No learning, no science, no art, very, very small amounts of this. And really 1,000 years of very limited progress for the European people. So this time is called the Dark Ages. The political system in Europe, because the governments had collapsed, was called feudalism. And basically it revolved around control and protection. Kings and nobles would build castles, such as the one you see here, for protection. They would use their resources to do that, and they would hire knights and other soldiers to protect them. And then, because everyone needed protection from the Vikings, the Huns, the Mongols, all the barbarians that were going around raiding and terrorizing everyone, the common person, who was known as a peasant, would need access to the castle when these invasions came. In order to get access to the castle, the peasants would have to work non-stop for the king or the local noble. They would work the fields, they would do all the work, and they really were allowed little or no freedom. They couldn't even leave. So in some ways, this is similar to slavery in terms of these people had limited freedom, they would work very hard, and they didn't get much to show for it. So feudal system or feudalism was not a very effective system. It was not a system based on merit in any way. If your parents were peasants, you would be a peasant. Kings, their daughters or son would become rulers regardless of how competent they were. So it really was a bad system. Let's get through the Crusades. The Crusades, the Christians went and invaded the Middle East, and when they did that, they had some success and some failures, but they did realize that there was more to the world than just Europe, and that the people of the Middle East in many ways were more advanced than Europeans. So the one positive, the Crusades were horrible, but one positive of the Crusades was that there was some exposure for science and learning to the European people, and they began to start thinking a little bit about that once again. Marco Polo added even more to this. Marco Polo walked to China and brought back silk and spices and Asian ideas, Chinese ideas, and it really opened people's minds to what was out there. The world was an expansive place, and there was a lot to be gained from explorations, and other explorers will copy him, and eventually that'll lead to Columbus landing in America, Magellan circling the world, and many of the great explorers that we'll cover later. The end of the Middle Ages or Dark Ages was caused by the Black Death. The Black Death was a horrible, horrible, contagious disease that killed millions and millions of Europeans. About 33 million in all is the estimate, I believe. That roughly 1/3 of Europe's population. It was spread by fleas. The fleas would bite rats that were infected, and then they'd go bite people. And it started in Asia, and it was horrible in China as well, and it will travel with the trade caravans and on boats eventually into Italy and southern Europe and spread from there. It was very quick and painful death. Usually with the Black Death of the plague, you would get these buboes or bubbles on your skin. They would turn black and your skin would rot away and feel like it was on fire, and then a terrible, terrible fever where your organs would basically become too high temperature to function properly and shut down, leading to the death. It killed Europeans by the millions, but it was a horrible, horrible thing. However, one of the things, the positive of it was that there was actually, because so many people died, extra food, a surplus of food for the first time. And because of that surplus of food, the peasants didn't have to scrounge for food all the time. And not everyone had to be a peasant. Not everyone had to be a farmer. And so with the extra food, people started doing other things. They started building ships. They started traveling. They started doing art. They started studying music. They started learning how to read and write again. And as this slowly happened, Europe began to wake up. A time of learning was starting to come upon us. And that time of learning, or the rebirth of art and learning, was called the Renaissance. It began in north-central Italy, where small towns began to grow and people began to share ideas in these towns. People began to abandon the feudal system and look for more freedom and look for opportunities in the cities, and they shared ideas there as it went. And as this happened, science, art, logical thinking, learning, studying the Greeks and Romans, studying classical education began to grow, and Europe began to wake up, and people began to explore. So the Renaissance was a great time, and one of the most important things that happened in the Renaissance was the invention of the printing press. The printing press was actually invented in China. However, Johann Gutenberg was the first to really make it popular. The Chinese had too many letters to make it real effective. But the printing press allowed people to share ideas for the first time without actually being there. You could copy books, you could copy printed materials and share ideas with people, and people began to learn how to read, began to study, they began to learn, they began to share ideas, and this will change the world. So the printing press is really one of the most important inventions in the entire world. Along with the printing press and the ideas of science and things like that starting to go, this was a boom time for art. The Italian artists, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Donatello, Raphael, among many others, began to study art and create some of the greatest works of art that the world has ever seen, and of course among many others. And this art will inspire and influence the world, and still does today. So that's a pretty brief overview of the Renaissance. You might ask, how does this relate to American history? Well, you know, the ideas of the Renaissance will inspire some of the ideas in America. The Renaissance leads to continued further development, eventually the Enlightenment, which will really have a huge influence on America. Also, the start of exploration starts in the Renaissance. People begin to sail around the world, and of course that will lead to Europeans landing in America and eventually the foundations of our country. One of the big ideas of the Renaissance was humanism. That's the idea that people should not just solely focus on religion and the afterlife, that they can actually make positive changes for themselves during this life, and through science, art, learning, and the goal of making a better life for yourself. Not only can you have a good afterlife, you know, heaven, but you can also have a good life here on earth as well. So that was a big advancement as well. You know, look at famous Renaissance art, of course, the Mona Lisa. She's so painted by Leonardo da Vinci, and the powerful thing with the Mona Lisa is her eyes look like they're following you, and the uniqueness of her mouth and her facial expression. Very powerful painting, probably as famous as the world has ever seen. Another famous work of the time was the Sistine Chapel, which is in the Vatican in Rome. A huge, huge chapel covered from the ceilings completely covered with distorted creation, as painted by Michelangelo. Supposed to be breathtakingly beautiful. Anyway, that kind of sums up that's kind of the last chapter, lesson of the chapter. These are just things in chapter 1 that don't relate directly to American history, not all of them, but it's the kind of the foundations that start the process of forming our country. So I hope this was helpful, and you can check out all the other lessons as you prepare for exams or whatever you have going in terms of requirement and assessment. Thank you.